Hello guys, I'm Tom, and today we're going to see what the joy virus is. One of the strangest, most eye-catching, and absolutely fascinating topics that I've been asked to analyze on this channel is, without a doubt, the famous joy virus, also known as the happiness virus. We're talking about a phenomenon so peculiar that it could only exist in a universe as delirious as the Amazing World of Gumball, a series that is already, by itself, a roller coaster of creativity and oddities. But with this episode, believe me, things reached a whole new level. This virus makes its first appearance in the third season of the series, and from the very beginning, it's clear that we're not dealing with a simple cartoonish cold. No, here we're talking about an animated pathogen that plays in a completely different league, an agent so contagious that it would make any real-world virus seem harmless. Its main effect? Immersing its victims in a state of absolute happiness, a kind of unstoppable euphoria that borders on the most surrealistic ecstasy. But the most shocking part isn't just the level of joy it induces, it's the speed at which it spreads. When the outbreak starts at Gumball School, the infection spreads like an uncontrollable wildfire. And that's exactly why in this video we're going to break it down completely. We'll talk about its mysterious origin, analyze each of the symptoms it generates, see how it evolves through its 5 stages, explore the most curious characteristics and behaviors of the infected, and of course, discover the antidote that can stop it. The joy virus, or whatever you prefer to call it, joy virus, joy by bears, la alegria, is one of those ideas that seem simple on the surface, but become fascinating when you examine the details. The very fact that it exists in the world of Gumball is already a triumph, because what other series could turn such a strange concept into something iconic? Interestingly, we know its official name thanks to the ever-eccentric Mrs. Simeon, who names it during the episode, adding that characteristic touch of sarcastic humor. Its function is clear: to infect in order to induce uncontrollable happiness, a state of ecstasy so intense that it defies all logic. The most disturbing part is that we're not talking about a virus that's hard to transmit. On the contrary, its level of contagion is ridiculously high. A simple hug, skin contact, or even contact with bodily fluids is enough for the infection to spread. In other words, in the universe of Gumball, no one is safe from being happy by force. So how does this virus arise? This is where the series' characteristic, surreal humor comes into play. It all begins with something called the miraculous hug, described as a gesture capable of concentrating all the love and joy in the world into a single act. And who's responsible? None other than Richard Watterson, Gumball's father, who, as usual, triggers chaos without even meaning to. After that hug, a multicolored cloud is released, marking the start of the infection. The person who receives the hug becomes patient zero, and from that moment on, the psychedelic epidemic is unleashed. But what's truly interesting are the symptoms, which are as exaggerated as they are creative. Among the most notable, we have extreme, uncontrollable happiness, to the point where the victim cannot stop smiling. High fever, indicating the acceleration of the infection. Pupils dilated to disturbing levels. Rainbow-colored bodily fluids, one of the most iconic and bizarre details. Rapid heartbeat, reflecting the state of constant excitement. Compulsive singing and smiling, sometimes in auto-tuned tones. However, the infection doesn't happen all at once. The joy virus evolves through 5 stages that completely transform the infected, ultimately turning them into something more. A hugger, a kind of happy zombie whose sole mission is to spread the infection. Let's look at these stages in detail. First stage, the smile becomes permanent. There's no way to erase it. Even if you try to force the face, it always returns to that unsettling expression. In addition, the infected start producing a peculiar sound when they stomp their heels on the ground, creating a strange and disturbing rhythm. Second stage, The first changes in vocal behavior appear. The infected begin compulsively singing, but in an electronic tone, as if their voice had passed through an auto-tune filter. Between songs, frantic laughter can be heard. This is also where one of the most iconic symptoms emerges. They spit a rainbow-colored liquid. Third stage. The brain begins to give in. Visual hallucinations appear, ranging from non-existent objects to deformed and absurd versions of familiar people. The pupils dilate even further, an unmistakable sign that the virus is taking over the mind. Fourth stage. The hallucinations decrease, but an uncontrollable urge to give hugs and kisses appears. This is the most dangerous stage for spreading the infection, because the infected seek physical contact at all costs. Fifth stage. Everything culminates in a scene as disturbing as it is extravagant. The infected bursts into incessant laughter, followed by coughing and vomiting rainbow fluids. Then they fall into a brief faint, while their pulse beats to the rhythm of a cheerful melody. Even the medical monitors show rainbow-colored electrocardiograms. When they wake up, the individual has transformed into a hugger, a creature dominated by the virus, with a grotesque smile and an irresistible desire to spread happiness. Everyone who reaches this final stage shares the same fate. They become beings brimming with joy, highly infectious, impossible to stop, and easily recognizable by that unsettling smile that gives them away. The multicolored fluid that in earlier stages appeared only sporadically, like accidental vomits or isolated spits, has now become a permanent companion in the mouths of the infected. It's as if they are condemned to drool this rainbow liquid without pause, a constant drip that creates a scene as mesmerizing as it is unsettling. The contrast between their wide smiles and that iridescent substance sliding down their lips turns every moment into something disturbing, almost dreamlike. But that's not the only thing that draws attention. Adding to this surreal spectacle is another feature impossible to ignore: the exaggerated dilation of their pupils. And it's not a uniform symptom. It varies slightly in each infected individual, giving them unique expressions, all equally disturbing. Some examples are particularly striking. Mr. Small, for instance, develops tiny pupils tinged with red, a detail that gives him an almost demonic appearance, as if his characteristic kindness had turned into a latent threat. Tina Rex, on the other hand, acquires a fierce, penetrating gaze, almost like that of a supernatural predator. And then there's Gumball, whose transformation adds a grotesque touch. His eyelashes elongate and curl to exaggerated proportions, drawing all attention to his gaze and creating an aesthetic that is both comical and unsettling. Now, let's talk about the so-called huggers. And no, this term is neither a metaphor nor a funny nickname. They are called this because these creatures constantly extend their arms, seeking to embrace anyone in their path, driven by a desire bordering on compulsion. And they do this accompanied by a frenzied, unceasing laughter that echoes in a disturbing way, filling the environment with a tone somewhere between festive and sinister. Added to this are their torn, stained, and weathered clothes, clear signs that they have left behind any trace of humanity to become something else entirely, entities of pure, contagious joy. Regarding their behavior, they are as fascinating as they are terrifying. When they reach the fifth stage of the virus, they lose self-awareness and with it, much of their intelligence, memories, and original personality. They are no longer individuals. They are extensions of the virus. However, they retain basic motor functions and surprisingly impressive agility. They can run, jump, and move swiftly to reach their ultimate goal: to hug and spread the infection. One curious and simultaneously unsettling detail is that even in this state, some fragments of memory and emotions seem to survive. A clear example is seen when Gumball, already infected, manages to hug Penny, transmitting the virus. but deliberately ignores Banana Joe, a character he never liked. This indicates that although the virus erases most of the identity, it leaves small traces that influence behavior. That said, we are not talking about intelligent creatures. Quite the opposite. Their reasoning capacity is minimal. In fact, many times they cannot even distinguish between infected and healthy people, which opens a strategic opportunity to deceive them by mimicking their gestures and behaviors. However, there is something that guides them with precision: their instincts. Huggers show an excessive attraction to the sounds of screams, and especially to negative emotions such as sadness and despair. When they detect these signals, they lunge with a single purpose: to hug and infect. Are they dangerous? Individually, not so much. If you face just one, there is room to dodge or distract it. But the real danger arises when they act in groups. A horde of huggers is, without exaggeration, a devastating force. They can sweep through a room in minutes, tear down doors, knock over small structures, and turn any attempt at resistance into a lost cause. It is the logic of mass contagion. The more creatures there are, the greater the destructive capacity and the faster the spread. And speaking of spread, here comes one of the most chilling points. The speed at which the virus transmits increases proportionally with the number of infected. The series clearly shows how just 2 huggers are enough to infect an entire school in less than 5 minutes. Additionally, the evolution time of the virus drastically shortens in each successive victim. While in patient 0, the progression through the 5 phases is relatively slow, in subsequent infected individuals, it can take as little as 5 seconds. Of course, there are exceptions. A curious case is Mrs. Simeon, whose transformation process takes approximately 30 seconds. The reason? It is hinted that her bitter character and pessimistic personality seem to slow down the infection. It is still fast, but this difference adds an interesting nuance. Emotional state influences the development of the virus. Now, the question every horror and macabre enthusiast wants to answer: does this virus have weaknesses? Yes, and they are as unexpected as they are clever. The first is chromatic camouflage. Painting the body with bright, eye-catching colors can trick the huggers into believing the person is already infected. This tactic is seen in the case of Tobias, whose multicolored appearance allows him to go unnoticed amidst the chaos. The second weakness is more theoretical, yet equally fascinating. People with deep depression or an extremely bitter personality might resist the infection. Although this is not explicitly confirmed, there are indications suggesting it, reinforcing the idea that the mind plays a crucial role even in this fictional universe. And the third weakness, the most important, is the ultimate antidote: sad music. Yes, you read that correctly. A specific piece, the legendary Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, has the power to neutralize the virus. The explanation is brilliant. The melancholic and somber atmosphere of the work counteracts the virus's euphoric energy, shutting it down at the root. As soon as the first notes play, the effects are immediate. The pupils return to their original size, the multicolored flow stops, and the forced smiles disappear. It is like witnessing an emotional purge that restores the infected to normality.